Speaking of doctors, looks like I get to start physical therapy and see a neurosurgeon about what the hell they can actually do once they get the MRI.
So what if, like, surgery is an option?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like, the doctor today sounded like, like maybe we can actually fix it. Because up until that point, everybody I talked to was kind of like, it's probably going to be there forever.
Your leg's dead. Chop it off.
I mean, basically, yeah. Like, it was kind of like you're not going to be able to fix it is almost what I got out of it before.
You're going to be the bionic man by the time we're done with all this, aren't you?
No.
I mean, you don't want to be half cyborg after all this?
My cousin actually kind of is. He went through the same thing. He has what's called a neural stimulator implanted. And it's like a little, I don't even know what to call it. But it's like a little box, like a little electronic box implanted next to his spine. What it does is it sends a non-noticeable pain receptor into your brain on a constant basis because your brain can't process more than like one type of pain at once. And it like, so when that pain does flare up, your brain's already ignoring it. If that makes sense. Like, whatever it is, it's sending an impulse that tricks your brain into not letting you actually feel the pain.
So you become a cyborg and invulnerable.
To that specific pain, yes. Like, you still feel pain, but...
See, what I'm hearing is superhero in the making.
I mean, it's got the origin story.
Yeah, it's all built in there.
It's kind of writing itself.
A malfunction in the stimulator means I no longer feel any pain.
Yeah, see? We're figuring this out.
Yeah, I'm a long way from that.
So you have to get become a superhero the old-fashioned way. Spider bites, radiation.
Yeah, I mean, I could try.
Throw yourself off of buildings and hope you fly.
I'm not going to do that one. But, walking a little closer to the microwave every now and then, maybe.
Yeah, just, stick your head in there a couple times a day. Just sleep in there.
You're just taking it to the kill yourself point. Like, you're just saying, just kill yourself, and if you turn into a superhero, all right, you're a superhero. If you don't,
most superhero origins involve somebody basically dying, right? And then they just kind of be reborn as the superhero.
Which is why a lot of people don't actively seek out their superhero origin.
Well, fair. That's fair.
Sending off low levels of gamma radiation. Nothing harmful.
I mean, I don't know.
Mike's pinky turns green. We'll be good to go.
Yeah. I would take a bionic pinky. Listen,
with a little laser inside.
It doesn't even have to have a laser inside. Just give me Hulk strength and just my pinky.
Just a laser pointer. You'd have job security as the stickiest PowerPoint presenter ever. Like, every corporate retreat would be coming after you. Like, we got the human laser pointer finger guy.
Human laser pointer finger. We got to think of a better name than that. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bri Guy and the Super Friends. I'm your host, Brian Labick. Joining me for this episode is someone who tries on their super suit daily just to make sure it still fits, Josh Dorch.
Where is my super suit?
And next up, we have someone who still hasn't decided his favorite superhero pose, Mike Bradley.
Oh, I mean, I said that, but I mean, secretly I've decided.
Oh, which one is it?
You're going to have to wait and see the next time I strike it.
Regular superhero landing on the knee?
No, that's lame. The superhero landing on the knee, Deadpool made the perfect point about that. It just hurts.
It does hurt.
But my superhero pose is, look, it's America's ass, all right? So you just have to lay on your stomach, planking a little bit, have a great ass, and just stay there. That's it. That's all there is to the superhero pose.
Is required.
Right after a good fight, he's just like, oh, well, time to pose, and just hits the deck and just puts his ass in the air.
Look at America's ass.
It's a good way to taunt people, I guess, too. I could see it.
Yeah. You gotta have a good ass, though. Like, you can't, it doesn't work if you don't.
So we are here to finally talk about a new Marvel movie. It's been a long time coming.
What?
Yeah, we
Get right out of town.
Just trying to look back, because Josh was asking me this before. It's a little bit of a flashback. The movie was originally set to release May 1st, 2020. And then, 2020 happened. And after some release date shuffling, we finally got it on July 9th, 2021.
What is it that we got? Because we haven't named it yet.
Black Widow. Yeah, we're talking about Black Widow. Sorry. Yeah, that's a good thing to talk about. And then Josh had asked me, like, when was the last time we actually talked about Black Widow? Or did we ever talk about any of the trailers and stuff like that? So I was digging through some of the episodes. It looks like where we talked about it was episode 175, which was in December of 2019.
Wow.
Which ended up being probably about a week or two before episode 9.
Yeah.
So right before episode 9 came out, they dropped a bunch of trailers on stuff. So we hit like 5 different trailers on this episode. The first one we talked about was Black Widow.
Nice.
So it has been a while. I don't think, if you've stuck with the show for a while, we used to do trailers all the time. That was something that I loved doing until I realized some of these trailers start to spoil stuff after trailer 2. So we've got to the point where it's like maybe we talk about the first trailer and then that's it. So Black Widow has had numerous trailers since then. We have not talked about them on the show. So there's, been other marketing, release date shifts, all that stuff. We might have talked about it too, and I didn't listen to that episode to see if it came up. We did have an episode where we talked about movie release shuffling. It might have been on our list when we talked about that episode, and I'm trying to scroll through now to figure out when the hell that was.
There's a good chance that we did, since it was less than 2 months before,
right, it was going to be a couple
main
months
COVID
removed.
Lockdown, so it was one of the first casualties of delay, and that was when we thought, like, oh, we'll just have some minor delays. This is the only time we'll talk about this.
Yeah. And I think, between all the other delays we've had, I don't know if we could have been revisiting movie delays for a while every time they got delayed, but we were trying not to because we wanted some firm dates before we could really talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you have a number of days that it's been since we recorded a review of an MCU movie?
I did not tally that.
So believe it or not, it looks like second week, July 2019.
Yep.
Which is second week, July 2021. We're almost probably close to 2 years to the day since we did Far From Home. That was
okay.
161 was the episode number. And we are now on 232.
Yes, correct.
So 71 episodes.
Oof.
Since an MCU review. That is a lot.
Yeah.
Hope
you're not sick of them, because we're going to have a lot more coming over the next couple months.
Yeah. When inside quip for the listeners real quick, Mike and Brian and myself and some others went to see Black Widow together. And it was on opening night on Friday the 9th. And as we're sitting there, I realized it has been literally over 2 years. 2 years and a few days since I sat in a theater and saw a Marvel movie for the first time. And Brian, I think you and I were together at that point because we went on the 4th of July for like a really early show, like a noon matinee for Far From Home.
Okay.
And I remember thinking like, wow, literally 2 years since like we really did this the last time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
it's simultaneously like kind of gone quickly, but also easily felt like much longer.
Well, I mean, we've had stuff to hold us over. Like the Marvel shows have helped pass the time. Otherwise, it would have felt really bad between all that
for
stuff.
the last few months. Like
right.
That whole year and a half where there was nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
Was kind of rough. And, for me, I will say I'm going to do my best for this review. My experience was great. You know, we're getting back to see a Marvel movie in the theater again. And right up until about 30 seconds into the movie, it was like, this is going to be great. And then a woman and her child showed up and sat down on the other side of Amy. And
yeah, I heard him.
Oh, is that where
the entire movie?
I couldn't tell if they were behind us or not.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I missed a solid third of the exposition in this movie because of the kid talking over it.
Yeah.
So I still have yet to watch it again, but there is a solid chunk of the exposition and like dialogue that just, you know, 'cause
Well,
you miss a little more too because you're like, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut
Yeah.
up, and you're not like paying attention because you're so pissed off.
We will do our best to try to fill in the gaps for you if we need to.
That would be appreciated.
That is rough. I'm
Yeah,
doing
go ahead,
one
go ahead.
Last comparison here, real quick. I'm looking. I know it wasn't by design, but I'm looking to see if this was almost the longest gap in actual release dates between MCU movies ever, or like how long it has been since there was this much time in between. So there has not been, by design, there's not been a 2-year gap in movies since the MCU began.
Yeah, I feel
But
like the
this
biggest
is-
gaps would have been early on, right? And then after that, it seemed like
Yeah, it
at
would've
least
been
2 a
like
year.
Every year,
Iron
it was
Man, the
multiple
Hulk,
per years.
or-
Yeah, so Iron Man comes out in May of 2008. The Incredible Hulk comes out in like mid-June 2008. So there's only about 6 or 7 weeks between those.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then Iron Man 2 doesn't come out till May of 2010. So it's about 23 months.
Okay, so that's actually close then.
It's close, but it's less.
Yeah.
So because of the delays in this is the longest gap between singular releases ever.
Sounds about right.
And at the beginning, it can obviously be forgiven as much. Like they went from, you know, kicking off a franchise to rebooting a franchise to doing the sequel to the kicked off franchise. So like they didn't have the thread there yet. So
Right.
that almost makes a lot more sense. But this one, yeah, just by circumstances, is the longest period of gap between new movies.
So, you know, coming out of the pandemic and theaters are starting to come back and everybody's like, for like we talked about, we were in the theater for this movie. We actually went to the theater to watch this one. So how did it do opening weekend and stuff like that? So I got some numbers.
Ooh.
So domestically, it opened with 80 million, which was the highest pre-pandemic, well, like highest opening weekend for a movie domestic since I think I saw them talk about Rise of Skywalker was the last domestic. Now, I didn't actually look to see what the domestic opening for Rise of Skywalker was. I'm sure it crossed the 100 million mark for that movie, but
Oh, gotta be easily.
so
Yeah,
this
that
one
was pre-pandemic, so I'm
Yeah.
sure it's plenty higher than that.
So it made 80 million domestic. It made another 79 million international. And this was also one of the movies that Disney released on Disney Plus, but you had to pay $30 if you wanted to watch it at home with their premiere access and stuff. Typically, at least the way it's been over the last couple years, studios do not usually release numbers for that kind of stuff. Disney did for this. They calculated that about 60 million came from Disney Premiere Plus purchases. So watching it through Disney
Wow.
Plus. Which culminates, we're adding all those numbers together in a combined opening weekend of 219 million.
It's
Which
pretty
is
impressive.
really good, all things considered. Because I don't
And-
think all theaters are up at 100%. There are certain areas that are still closed, especially international. So if we were back to normal, I think 200, 250 in the theater would have been easily done.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
all
but
things
I like
considered,
seeing
it's a
the
pretty good number.
numbers though. From Disney Plus, I like seeing them release the information. Like, hey, that means we sold 2 million of these.
Yeah, and you'd like to think that if they're starting it, maybe everybody else could start this too. But they put other movies out on Disney Plus with their premiere access too and never released numbers for that before. So either they sucked or they're finally starting to push this forward and hope other people do the same.
They might be tracking it more closely. You know what I mean? For like a big movie, they're going to be like, oh yeah, we did this. Whereas other ones, they're like, whatever. Like.
Well, they
But
did it
for
for
this, they'll hype it,
Mulan and Cruella, right? Where the other ones and Raya, where the other
And
ones
Raya.
they did premiere. And they didn't put out any
That I can
numbers for
think of.
those. So,
Okay.
and
I feel like,
HBO is doing their, day and date release with HBO Max and in the theater. And
That's different. Cause
well, I
it's-
mean,
you're not
they could
paying
very
extra.
well release at least viewer numbers. All they say is like, this is our most watched movie, which means nothing when you don't look at any hard numbers to compare anything to. That means nothing
Sure.
to me. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. So
yeah, if
just
you had 30 million
stats.
people watch it on the first day it was there, that's a big deal.
yeah,
If you had
so
100,000 and your next highest was 95,000, it's like,
Right.
okay, whatever.
that tells me nothing that it was the highest grossing, or not highest grossing, but highest watched movie on your service. That means nothing. So having some of those hard data numbers, I think, would be nice to look at. So we'll see if this continues. If other movie theaters and studios and services that have these movies come out like this, or even paid at a premium, if they start releasing numbers like this, I'm curious how all that goes going forward. Because people are still, the argument is still there, is whether or not theaters could be hurting because of this type of model, and I think it's proving that they can work concurrently. And I think we talked about that before, where I think you're not going to really take away from the other. I think both will strengthen each other. You're going to get money at home. You're going to get money in the theater. Ultimately, I think when things get back to normal, you're still going to see a lot more towards the theater than at home. But for right now, I think them coming out a little bit even, and that the theater actually making more money than at home, I think, puts a little bit more weight on theaters are not going anywhere. There is still a demand to want to see things in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so before we get to the spoilers and stuff like that, I just want to revisit the numbers. So the numbers that I threw out for the box office weekend, the 80 million domestic, 79 million international, 60 million Disney Premiere Plus, or whatever they call it. Are those numbers higher or lower maybe than what you guys expected for opening weekend? Any of that stuff surprising to you?
I still don't know what to expect for opening weekends. I'm still at a spot where, like, who knows what it's going to do? It's just like each new big film should start making more than the last one.
Right.
Until we get back to some sort of normalization. Until then, whatever happens, happens. It's kind of how I'm looking at it. I don't really know what number I would expect to hear.
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. I think I wouldn't have been shocked if it had been far less, just circumstantially. So I think what it did is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think, Josh and I think we talked briefly after the viewing when we came out of the theater, talking, just spitballing numbers, because I thought I had read, because we saw it Friday night, that I thought I had read that, like, Thursday night it made, like, 13 million, which I was like, wow, that's pretty good for a Thursday night. So what's it
Yeah.
going to do over the weekend? And we were sort of talking, I would have guessed between 100 and 150, which is sort of where it fell,
Mhm.
but they added the Disney Plus Premiere numbers in there, which I didn't know if they would or how that would work. So I think that was a generous estimate. I was like, if it makes that, I think that's a good sign, and that's more than I would have expected. So I think these
Mhm.
numbers are higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even without the Disney Plus stuff, it was above that. It was would have been 169, right?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good sign for theaters, which is good. I like to see that kind of stuff. So I'll be anxious to see what other movies do going forward, and I don't know if we have, without looking at a really release schedule, and I can't pull it off the top of my head, like what the next really big movie is going to be coming out. But I'm curious to see how I'll be looking at the numbers for sure, like almost every weekend when stuff comes out, just to see what movies are doing and how the theaters are bouncing back, because I'm curious.
Isn't Top Gun?
That got moved to
soon?
December.
Oh, it got moved again. I didn't even
Yeah.
notice. Okay, well then never mind that.
Like, I know Free
I-
Guy's in next month. I don't know if
That's
that's,
not
a real
gonna
big
be-
movie.
Yeah, that's not gonna
Suicide
be big,
Squad
big.
is the
Suicide
first
Squad might be a good
Friday
one. Yeah,
of August.
that might be
And
the next
then-
big one to keep an eye on.
Okay. And
In-
Shang-Chi should do some good numbers when the time comes. but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
And
there's
another-
definitely other things between now and then.
Yeah, I just can't think off the top of my head without really rolling through the internet and trying to Google search stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time people hear this, Space Jam Legacy will have just been released.
Yeah.
In
I don't
other
expect
times.
that to do
Potentially
real
big.
good,
It's a
but
kids movie. Anytime it's a kids movie, though, it can surprise you with the numbers.
yeah, I
Mhm.
guess that one I'd be curious. One, like, yes, it might attract kids, but two, I'm wondering if it'll hit that nostalgic, vibe for people
Mhm.
that like us that grew up watching Space Jam in the '90s. I
Yeah.
want to go see this. I might actually make it to the theater this weekend to see it because fuck it, why not? So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole reasons, but I don't think Wayne Knight's going to be there, so
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be there if Wayne Knight's not there.
That's the reason.
All right, so we'll get into what we thought of the movie. I'm going to throw out the spoiler alert. So if you've not seen Black Widow, haven't rented it or not rented, but got it off Disney Plus, gone to the theater, and actually I'll throw out the spoiler alert also for Falcon and Winter Soldier. If you have not watched that show, because we might touch on some of that stuff, pause us now, come back after watching the movie and finishing that series. Otherwise, continue on. We'll be sure to spoil some stuff for you. Either way, spoilers to follow.
Wee-oo, spoiler! Wee-oo, spoiler! You know, something like that.
All right, so we are in the spoiler territory, and Josh, I'm going to lead with this question specifically for you.
Oh boy.
What did you think of the Nirvana cover over the opening credits of the movie? Because I could not shout at you when the movie was playing.
I liked it. I was not familiar with this one. I don't know if it was like a new arrangement that was sort of commissioned, I'll call it, for the film or not. I liked the use of it. It was, if they had differently than just the straight use of "Come as You Are" in Captain Marvel. This was not just, we're playing Nirvana's "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Yeah.
It was definitely a more just like orchestral piano and vocal arrangement with a female voice on it. It was almost like subtle enough that because there's it's played over so much imagery and continued events.
Yeah.
So you're getting the opening, like you're getting your opening credits, but they're continuing the opening scene and the sharing of story information hasn't stopped. So I almost wondered, like I forgot about it at the end, but I almost wanted to ask, like, did everybody catch that? Because I think it's so layered and it's so different that you almost don't, like, you could almost miss it easily.
It took me about halfway through the song to realize
Yes.
what I was hearing.
Exactly.
And then I was like, oh, I dig this.
Yes. And I don't know, Mike, was that your experience or did you catch it pretty quick?
I was able to catch it pretty quick.
Okay.
I feel like it was a very Zack Snyder-ish opening. I feel like that's a thing he likes to do.
Yep.
Is, play that mix on a song that's slower and different over a bunch of scenes that are happening, and I don't know, it felt very Snyder to me. I know
That is
it,
Good
like it's just
comparison. Yeah.
something he does, but in terms of the song itself, I feel like I understand why they chose it, and why they went that route. It fit the tone. It was okay. I wasn't like thrilled with it or anything like that.
Mhm.
I thought it was a cool idea, but not something where I'm like, I'm gonna seek that out and listen to it on its own.
Like get it from iTunes or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. If anybody saw it or if you haven't seen the film yet, but you're curious about what we're talking about and you would just like to hear this different arrangement, it is a Smells Like Teen Spirit cover. It says credited to Think Up Anger featuring Malia, 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 and then the initial J, if you want to look that up.
Yeah, okay, so I wrote that down because I was curious and I kept forgetting to look up who did that song, so I will definitely listen to that after the show, after we get done with the show.
Mm-hmm. And it's I'll just go off a quick tangent here. There's something about reinvigorating Nirvana's music that it seems to be more fitting to lend itself to female vocalists.
Okay.
When they were inducted into the Rock Hall, the songs that the band performed at the induction, they had all female guest singers on every song. They had no guys singing Kurt's parts.
I didn't
And
know
there's
that.
something, I think, either to the lyrics, the tone, Kurt's voice, etc., that comes through very well. Honestly, I think better, afterward with a female voice, and I really dug this take on it.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't know that. I don't know if there's anywhere specific you guys want to start. We could sort of just vaguely talk like direction, writing, characters, and just kind of spin from there.
So can I throw out something that I found truly impressive about this movie?
Okay.
As a good, like, kickoff point. I feel like it can kick conversation off. So I feel like this movie does something kind of unique to anything that we've seen in a superhero movie before. And with the way that the culture around making a female-led superhero movie is, and there's a lot of toxicity out there on the internet and stuff like that, this movie takes its opportunity and portrays a very good, powerful story about women that I am almost certain will pass any Bechdel test or anything they throw at it, because damn near the entire cast is female. There's a few male parts splintered in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it manages to do that and also play a redemption story about a middle-aged, overweight, bearded man at the same time. They squeeze that bit in and play this positive role for what he's able to do. And it's something I feel like that's different, because they're squeezing his origin in and Yelena's origin in and all these things we know nothing about, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they're managing to squeeze in this story about him while doing the whole overarching story. Does that make sense? Where, like,
Yeah.
they're squeezing in, like, almost like very intentionally having him be the way he is.
And I think the use of it doesn't detract or distract or overshadow Natasha's story, Yelena's narrative. It actually enhances it.
Exactly. And I think that's something that I've seen so many people focus on. Oh, this is a female superhero movie. This is a male superhero movie. It's possible to tell just a superhero movie that sees things well from both aspects, that presents both things well. And I feel like this is probably the first time we've got a good look at something like that. At least from an origin standpoint. Team-up movies tend to be less capable of doing that, I think. I think they're too focused on too many things at once in most team-up movies to really make a statement or anything.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was something different that I didn't expect out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Well, let's spin with characters from there.
Sure.
I'll just run down the list. We can just talk about whoever we want to. But obviously, Scarlett Johansson comes back as Natasha. Florence Pugh is newest addition as Yelena. Rachel Weisz is Melina. David Harbour, as you mentioned, Alexei, who is the Red Guardian. Ray Winston is Dreykov, which was surprising to me, and I think the way they set it up, it wasn't as surprising when it happened, but I didn't think this going into the movie. Taskmaster was, I'm going to butcher her name, Olga Kurylenko.
No, you did good.
Was the girl
pretty good.
from Quantum of Solace.
Yes.
One of the Bond girls in there.
As well as Hitman, and because we just watched that recently, and she was in, wasn't it a Fassbender movie about like Nordic tribes? I can't remember what it's called, but
She's been in a lot.
She actually has a pretty good resume.
I think, Amy and I talked about this on the drive home a little bit because it irked me slightly.
The reveal or...
No, not the reveal. I thought it was really cool, and it made sense for the story and all that to have her be Taskmaster here.
Yeah.
I guess my issue was, isn't she like way older than that character should be? Because we see Natasha as an adult, quote unquote, kill her while she's a little girl. And if I'm not mistaken, they're about the same age in real life. If not, I think Olga might be older.
They're pretty close in age in real life. Yeah.
It just
There's
threw
a little
me
bit
off.
of that doesn't line up.
It being Olga Kurylenko is fine. It's just like that that would to me was a little bit of a continuity thing. Like I feel like that girl would not be that age yet.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't really even think about that.
That's the only issue I had with that. Like, it would have been cool if they let her talk too. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering how much she was actually in the suit, because it's very easy, I think, to stick a stunt double in there when you're all armored up and have a mask on. So I'm curious how
Right.
much she actually did, or if they
Which
just use her
may-
for the face shots and that's it.
Which the only real critique I had of the casting or the put together of all that was, given that like you did not need anybody even remotely recognizable to
Right.
be that part.
Yeah,
And I hate, like, not to put her down whatsoever. She probably wasn't very recognizable to many people. There's I think a lot of people that don't do what we do and retain this kind of stuff and harp on it and make a point to know it.
agreed.
But since they did, like, it's obviously very intentional. They cast her to be that reveal. They wanted a somebody to be that face.
Yeah,
And, like, she probably had like 2 days of shooting.
Well, I mean, I'd also argue they cast somebody that is recognizable and is I don't want to say a B-lister or try to go anywhere like with that, but somebody that you know that is worth casting and isn't just a throwaway casting, because they don't kill the character. And
Yeah, well, that was gonna
the
be my next
Taskmaster is a recurring character in a lot of things. Specifically Deadpool has a ton of interaction with Taskmaster, which is why I said, like, her not talking. I hope in the future when we see Taskmaster, they make that an option. I don't care who's playing the Taskmaster. The Taskmaster is supposed to be this quippy smartass who's kind of a dick. You know, I mean, as opposed to, like, the Spider-Man quippiness while he's fighting, where it's like, oh, he's funny, but, you know, haha.
So that could be a good foil to Deadpool.
Right, and that's why they put the characters together in the comics. So I would like at least to see her get more to do as the character.
Right, and maybe that was my worry, is that if this is a one and off, I think she has one line of dialogue and probably 2 minutes of face screen time, if that.
Yeah.
So, like, did you really need it to be anybody? But
I think, like Mike said, I think it's more like we're giving you this now to do something with it later,
hopefully, yeah, that's fair. I hadn't thought of that.
because she's still on the
Taskmaster
board.
is kind of a big deal for a lot of comic fans.
Okay, and we do have
Like,
Deadpool
it's-
3 coming up, hopefully in the next 2 to 3
Well,
years.
I
So.
mean, yeah, Taskmaster serves as a villain for a lot. Like, you could see that show up for Cap, too.
Mm.
So for, like, Sam Wilson's next foray, you could see Taskmaster show up. That would... Basically, anybody that's not super duper overpowered, Taskmaster can show up. As soon as somebody's, like, super powered, which is why it really wouldn't have worked with, like, Steve Rogers, because Steve Rogers just kicks his ass, because as soon as he hits him, like, Taskmaster doesn't have, like, super strength or durability or any, you know, I mean, it's just that photographic memory or whatever they call it in this case. It's
Right.
a little different, but
Well, I think it'd be interesting too. Like if they keep Taskmaster on the board and bring her back in another movie, how would they use her? Like I don't know if they'd use her as the villain because you're supposed to sympathize for her. And it'd be interesting to see how they build her up, and like now that she's finally able to like think for herself, how are they going to build the character that's under the armor? Like you said, if that character in the comics is quippy, are they going to give her that type of personality as she comes back to life? Kind of.
yeah, I mean, that's why I think it lines up better is appearing with Deadpool, is because of where they align the character. Because usually, like, Taskmaster's villainy for Deadpool is really just as a rival mercenary,
Right.
you know, hunting down the same contract, things like that. So I think that would play well for the way they set the character up here to be a hired killer for good. You know, similar to Deadpool, where, like, she doesn't kill the wrong people or, you know, whatever.
Okay. I
It
could see
could
that,
be-
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I have in mind at this time. There could be other reasons she turns up.
Yeah. I will say too, like part of the fun for me. So I may have mentioned it on the show before, but one of my guilty pleasures is to watch like reaction videos on YouTube. I get a kick out of that kind of shit. So the fact that this movie was on Disney Plus and you could watch it the same day, reaction videos were hitting YouTube, and you could watch people, get their cut down version of the movie and see certain aspects. So one of the videos I'd watched was a group watching the film, and I don't know if someone made the comment, but like when Taskmaster rolls up and is in the armor and is like stalking Natasha at certain scenes, they started making the comparison to Terminator and like mumbling the theme song, and then as their editor did in the video, actually put the Terminator theme song over top of
Oh, jeez.
like Taskmaster walking into a room and stalking around. I was like, that works really fucking good, surprisingly. You just see her walking around and you hear da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, this is great. I fucking love this. But I thought that was fun.
Wait, was it like evident to either of you that it was a female in the costume before the reveal?
Not at
I
all.
could tell
Not-
from the
not until
figure.
about 5 seconds before it happened. I had the thought, like, wait a second. I don't know. I had no reason to. Something occurred to me, like, what if? But up until that point, absolutely not.
I think it was somewhere mid in the movie, I think, when they really kept referring to the Dragov's daughter. Like, they kept bringing that up a couple times, where I started to think, well, why are they mentioning this numerous times if it's not going to pay off later?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't in like the fighting style or how the character walked or anything like that. I couldn't tell from that. Like nothing gave it away for me. It was just more just story elements that they kept peppering in there. Like, well, it would make sense if this was the twist, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But because at the same time, like Josh, what you said, like you could take the mask off and it could be anybody, but you almost don't want it to be anyone. You want it to be something, at least a character that fits the
Character,
story.
yes, I was thinking more the casting, but
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
the character having an impact and making that use it's a good opportunity to leverage.
Right. Yeah.
that
Yeah,
in a way, yeah.
if it's just a throwaway merc and it's just Tony Masters under there and you're just like,
Mhm.
oh, okay.
Yeah, you're not going to
That
know who
doesn't
this
make
character
sense.
is. It doesn't.
Yeah,
like,
like,
okay,
why are
great.
they
Who's this
here?
guy? Now what? Like,
Yeah.
so this worked out. I liked what they did here.
Yeah.
Like, I
Speaking
think
of-
for myself with that, I remember, like, very early on in the movie, like, the first time we see Taskmaster, I just remember having the thought, like, Taskmaster looks kind of feminine. Like, the shade, like, I just remember having that thought. I didn't, like, piece together the story elements of it until the end,
Yeah.
but I remember having an early thought, like, huh. I mean, just, like, the frame, the figure, whatever, it just looked kind of feminine. I was like, that's interesting,
Yeah.
but didn't really go anywhere with it.
So let's try to sort of quickly go through the cast here. What do you guys think is Scarlett coming back as Natasha? Yay, nay, good job, bad job?
Loved it.
Just as good as she's always been.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's owned this character for a while, so I think it's great to see her, front and center for this movie. I think it worked. I was cool with it. All good.
This is gonna sound like a tangent, but it's to specifically comment on her. You really have to, and this is the first time we've had to do this, maybe this entire journey, 24, 25 movies. This is the first time you absolutely have to be okay with not watching a superhero movie.
What do you mean by that?
She's not a superpowered person. No, but hardly anybody other than maybe, yes, Taskmaster in some ways and Red Guardian have abilities, but even the widows that he has trained,
Yeah.
like, they are not. So she had to carry an action movie.
Oh,
not,
yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a superhero movie.
Yeah.
She had to carry
Yeah.
a drama. She had to carry a character movie. And that was done exceedingly well.
Yeah, I agree. Florence Pugh's Yelena. What do you think about her?
Probably the best part of the movie. In my personal opinion, I am looking forward a lot to seeing the character again, which, the post-credit scene tells us, of course, we're going to. We can get into that when we get into that.
Yeah.
But we're going to be seeing Yelena more, and that's a very good thing. I was not really familiar with the actress before this. I maybe had seen her in one horror movie, if I'm like it. Wait, was she the one?
Midsummer?
Yeah, she was in Midsummer. That's what it was, and she was good there, and she killed it as Yelena here. Dude, she was enjoyable. She was funny.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? She did everything right.
So the first thing that I actually saw her in was a couple of months before, maybe even a year. I forget when it was released, but I saw her in Little Women. Sarah had really wanted to see it, so we went, and she was surprisingly like very good in it. She has a lot more range than I would have thought. And then sometime during COVID lock-in, we watched Fighting with My Family, the one where she plays Paige, based on the story of the
Oh, is that her? I
woman
don't think I
woman
realized
who
that was
goes into
her.
wrestling. Yeah, it's like a biopic pick about Paige.
Like I know the movie, I
Um,
just don't. I didn't connect the dots that that's Florence Pugh as the lead
Yep.
in that movie.
Yeah,
Yep.
I never watched the movie, but you see that, like, it's always pops up and tells me I should watch it. And on the cover, it doesn't look anything like her. That's surprising.
Mm-hmm. So that was my previous exposure. And I think she did very well. It's hard to both stand out and make sure that you're not trying to make it apparent. And I don't think she did, but make sure that you're not even giving the impression that you're trying to upstage Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah,
Like Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson is still the focal point of the movie. It's her
Yes.
movie.
yeah,
So you have to both be memorable, and like Mike said, like it was a standout, and that's what you're taking away. Obviously, we know Natasha's character is dead and gone, so you have to want people to want you to continue,
yeah,
and it sounds like that impression was left.
yeah. I agree. I think she stole the show for me. Like she's the one I latched onto pretty quickly. She's the one I feel like I was thinking about and talking about after the movie. So I am anxious to see where they go with her character in the MCU because I definitely want to see more of her for sure. She had some of the best jokes in the movie too. I think that were given to her.
Yeah,
I think I
mean,
laughed a
her
solid
and-
15 minutes about the posing thing. Like,
That was great.
Yeah.
That-
I want to
that
see the
scene alone.
outtakes of all, like, the different ways that she did that. Like,
Yeah.
all the different... I'm sure she tried to, like, ad-lib a few of the responses or things like that. I want to see those outtakes.
Rachel Weisz's Melina.
Kind of forgettable.
Yeah, she didn't
Like-
have too much to do, I guess.
Yeah, maybe
No.
that's my worry about it, is Rachel Weisz didn't do badly, but yeah, maybe the character needed a bit more.
I feel like I said the same thing when we, like, talking to Amy about it. The same way, just like, she's such a damn good actress. They could
Mhm.
have used her for more here. And I feel like they gave her a decent amount to do, you know what I mean? But she still didn't have as much to do or as much of a chance to show that off. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
to make use of her talent.
Yeah, I feel like Harper gets a couple moments or a scene or two extra opportunity to leave you with an impression that she didn't get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she also has,
I-
I think, the least amount of screen time out of all these other people, too.
Right. That's true, because they pick him up out of prison. You have that long extended sequence, and then
Right.
you basically meet her last after the opening.
Like, right before the third act, she comes into the movie.
That's
Well,
true. Yeah.
And she's not gonna, like, take part in any fights that happen because she's just a scientist that was, you know what I mean? Like, she's
Yeah.
not him.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, there's. So yeah, sorry, I didn't want to go forever off on that because I could have, but
But yeah, I think I agree. She did well with what she was given. Would have liked to see a little bit more. David Harbour's Alexi.
Again, damn near the best thing if it wasn't for Yelena. I feel like he had fun here. You can tell
Yeah.
Oh,
David
God,
Harbour
yeah.
absolutely loved doing this, and he made it fun. Like, he had so much fun with the character that it worked. The thing with him in prison in the arm wrestling
Mhm.
was fucking hilarious.
My wrist still hurts.
Just watching what he did to people.
Yeah. Ugh.
And I feel like him being, you know, this guy that's like bragging about fighting Captain America and everybody being like he was in ice on that at that time and not believing him. You know, I mean, I feel like he's gonna get redemption on that at some point. I don't know how yet, but I feel like he's gonna get redemption he wasn't lying about it, you know what I mean? But there was something that happened where he fought Captain America. But I don't know. I enjoyed the hell out of the character, and I hope we see more
So here's
at some point.
a thought that just occurred to me. When was Isaiah a super soldier?
I feel like that
I
was
would say
more.
the
That was like the same
50s.
time as Cap, roughly.
Yeah,
I
like-
thought.
Okay.
during
Was he used
that
in
and
the
then later
80s?
in
Because
the
I'm just
50s.
thinking of like the dates he was dropping is fighting a Captain
Mm.
America in the 80s. Could it be a character we've seen or heard from before?
I had that thought and the thought of, Cap himself, after going back to spend his time with Peggy, would be, 50s
Yeah.
or so in the 80s.
See,
Oh,
I
his
think that
age.
takes away from that whole storyline, though, if he's actually doing stuff there. Like, the whole point is that he's not Cap. He's just a dude.
I'm just saying-
I could maybe bend it. I actually was under the impression that took place literally in a separate timeline.
Right. I got
Like-
that too.
I mean, that number one. But even if I could get them
Well, I
together,
mean, Cap didn't really have access to the other timelines.
well, the right, but the timeline where he lived his life as a normal person would not have intersected with the one that Alexei exists in.
This is the whole Endgame time travel thing we tried to unravel whenever we talked about the movie,
Right.
which I don't want to dive
Just-
into now because we're going to
no,
get
no,
20
specifically
minutes on
where
this
thing
thing.
where he splits off to live a life. But anyway, maybe it is a point where you can get around to say he didn't, like, he wasn't in action as Cap. Maybe he, through the just circumstances of his life, found himself in a spot in time where somehow they would have crossed paths for a very short period, and an altercation did occur.
See, I think it works so much
I could
better
maybe buy that.
for the character if he's just full of shit. Like, I totally get that. I'm fine with that. I think that's more fun that way, that he just wants the story so bad he's just making it up.
He's
See,
been
I-
in prison for so long that he's
Yeah.
told a lie to himself so many times.
Right.
Well, that was the thing. Like, for me, where he's just telling it in prison, I'm like, okay, sure. But then he asks Natasha if Cap mentioned him.
I feel like it's just like maybe they've
If it's
heard about
commitment
each
to the
other in
delusion.
passing. Like, everybody knows about Captain America, and Cap's got to know that the Soviets have a comparable super soldier, but it's just not
Right.
even on his radar. Like, he gives a shit at all.
See, I feel like that was like put in there to be like some kind of confirmation that it did actually happen. That there was something that actually happened. You know what I mean? Like,
That'll be the one shot we get on the Black Widow Blu-ray.
Yeah, I hope so.
That
I
would
gotta
be
bring those
cool.
back. I did like that within Alexei's character, there was somebody like it obviously is like so long struggled with how his specific leadership treated him, and the life that they gave him and the life that they took from him, all of that. But at times, both he and Melina even make comments to basically still like criticize the West. So there's still like that semblance of, I have my ideals, and I don't regret what I was trying to achieve and what I was trying to serve, even if the people in charge of overseeing and executing those ideals effed it up.
Okay, yeah.
And he's angry at those people, but like he still seems to like be a patriot to his roots.
Yeah.
All that still came through in somebody who had those abilities, but was shut away for 20, 30 years. He conveyed a lot through the time, and not to say he didn't have much screen time, but probably if you looked at it, he probably didn't have as much as we think he did, and especially for like exposition moments like that, to just like share feelings.
Yeah.
So I feel like he did a lot with not very much.
Yeah, I think he was another character that I loved seeing him on screen, and I think he, aside from like Yelena, I think had some of the best jokes and
oh, for sure.
comedic moments in the movie, for sure. And he did a great job. The only complaint I have is that the accent, I think, comes and goes at certain points, but I feel
I
like
said
that
this-
happens to everybody trying to
Yeah,
do Russian
yes.
in any of these MCU movies, so
Yeah.
you can't really hammer that one home. Last cast member. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I did like they used him to make like the throw back or throw out the name of the Crimson Dynamo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Just to get it out there. I think like it's like maybe they will use something like that.
Yeah. Last cast member we'll talk about is Ray Winstone. I don't know how you say his last name. Dreykov's.
The character in and of itself, I wouldn't say he did anything bad. I think I was more impressed, and I said this to Sarah afterward, that these writers took such a throwaway comment that was written into the Avengers script as an example of Loki to just try to throw back at Natasha of her past and constructed an entire narrative around that.
Yeah.
Something that meant nothing, went nowhere ever, and found a way to make something that was so meaningful to her past and her path that they created this boogeyman out of that one detail. I thought that was amazing. Like that was a great accomplishment of the story creators and the writers.
Yeah, I had the same note that like that callback to that, like you said, that line from Avengers that for whatever reason still kind of sticks with me. Just the way that's
Yes.
delivered in that whole scene, but
Yes.
never thought we'd see anything of it. So to come back to that, what is it? Avengers was what 2012, so we're almost 10 years later, and we're finally coming back to that little breadcrumb. Like that's fun to me. I like that kind of shit.
And I think it was like this many years removed. There's something about the Phase 1 movies specifically, and maybe Avengers in particular, that if the creators and the people running Marvel Studios have their finger on the pulse of fan discussion enough, you didn't have to tell me anything about Dreykov's daughter. You did not have to explain and they didn't. Like, they did not give you any flashback to that moment in Avengers where she's reminded of it whatsoever. Like, they expect you to know what it was.
Yeah.
And go forward. And I think, like, based on what you just said, like, that is one of those things that so many years later, fans just picked up on these things. There's details of these trivial lines and mentions and moments that have just permeated this fandom and stuck with us.
Yeah.
That it, like, you didn't need the backstory to remember that it was a thing that already was mentioned.
Well, again, it's stuff that like comics have done for years, and suddenly we have this coming through on a medium that is visual in movies, and to me, that's exciting. I love that kind of shit. So spinning from the cast, I want to spin, like Josh, you mentioned sort of the writing, so I'm going to go over the writers real quick, and we'll talk about what we think of the story. Eric Pearson is listed as having the screenplay. He is credited for doing a lot of the Marvel one-shots. He wrote for Agent Carter. He wrote Thor Ragnarok and Godzilla vs. Kong. So he's got a little bit of experience with the MCU and some other big budget movies. Story by is credited with two people. Ned Benson, who the only thing really under their IMDb was the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, which I don't really know what that is. I've never seen that.
It was a trilogy, actually, and it was all released. I never watched it, but I think Eleanor Rigby was the reference, if I remember, was about like literally like the disappearance of this person, and it was a trilogy of British movies that all came out within like a few months of each other.
Okay.
They have the 3-parter. It looks like he might have both written and directed.
Okay, maybe I missed
at
that
least
part.
one of them, if not all of them.
The other person listed as having the story by is Jack Schaefer. She had done the screenplay for The Hustle, and she was actually the showrunner and head writer for WandaVision. So yeah, we got a little bit of some MCU staples getting a crack at Black Widow, which is good to see. Like Josh was kind of saying, considering they used this one little breadcrumb from Avengers, crafted a whole story out of it, callbacks to the Red Room, which is something I felt like needed addressed, considering how much we hear about it in the MCU and her past and where she came from. I loved this story. I thought they did a really good job connecting some of those dots. I think it fits very nicely where it's supposed to, in between Civil War and Infinity War. And it almost changes the way you're going to watch some of these movies. Like, I think it's a comment maybe I'll save until we get past the story part, and I'll sort of try to revisit it. But if you watch them sort of chronologically, this story lends itself to maybe help you give a shit about Natasha more when she meets her fate in Endgame and stuff like that. I think it definitely gives you a little bit more weight to that decision and what's going on there that I can appreciate.
I mean, I feel like, save for the end credits scene, you could plug this in with not a problem into what year would have that been? 2017, 2018?
Yeah.
Whatever year that would have been, that it would have fallen in right after Civil War. Because this is supposed to be almost like concurrent with Black Panther.
Yeah.
If I understood that correct, it's supposed to be like the same time. There's no reason this movie could not have been made then. This exact movie is what I mean. Like, it could just plug in. It doesn't reveal anything that you don't already know about at that point.
Well, let's sort of just spitball this, because I sort of have another question framed around this too. Is I've seen a lot of the discussion online and people critiquing this movie because they feel like it's something that should have come out like 3 or 4 years ago. So basically, should have hit release order, sort of where it happens chronologically. So it should have been released right around Black Panther, so we could have this lead into Infinity War. And maybe it's just because, we know Nat's ultimate fate. So it's harder, I think, for some people to latch on to that character in this movie, knowing she's going to die in a couple movies after this. Right. So, I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Is this enough? Did you feel any more or less invested in the story, knowing that Nat's fate is ultimately she's going to die?
Personally, I feel like knowing her story, it gives a couple moments, I guess, more weight, more significance. But for the most part, I can't say that I did. You know what I mean? I can't say like it mattered that it happened now.
Okay.
I'd say knowing that actually detaches you a little bit from the character, which is why it's so good that Yelena and Alexei are such strong characters to help lift that up and give you some new characters you don't know what's going to happen to already.
Right.
To follow. But in terms of Natasha's character and where things went, it worked. And, the movie kind of ends her story there on a little bit of like a happy, lighter note, as she's leaving the whatever you want to call that supplier guy.
Right.
And that to me was kind of like a bittersweet moment, because it's like, yeah, but she's going to die.
Yeah.
Like, I already know how this is going to end. So
yeah, but at least like the way that since you get her 2-part arc in both Infinity War and then Endgame, the fact that like she's not stepping away to like immediately or soon go like walk into the she's not even walking into Infinity War, right? Like this movie
they're going into hiding.
Right. This movie concludes 2 to 3 weeks, maybe at the most, after the events of Civil War. So they're on the run together after she finds Steve, which is my only gripe with how they left this off.
I think, actually, the timeline, I think, was less than 4 days after Civil War. So it's supposed to be, like, right after.
Okay, and then as we're watching it, like I said, then I lost the thread of, like, how long over what time span this is actually taking place. But a couple of days, we'll say this takes place. So there's that point, she eventually, I guess, tracks down Steve either before or after he has broken everyone else out of the raft. So they're on the run for a year and a half, 2 years together. And they have that time, and then the events of Infinity War kick in. So I didn't really leave in like a morose, like, oh, but what happens. Like, she's not getting on that plane to go walk into the event that then leads to her death immediately.
Right.
So I don't. It didn't have that impact on me.
Yeah, I think I was fine with it. I don't think it distracted from me one way or the other. because this story is very good, and I think it works for her character and builds her character up. That I think I can appreciate that part of it. And again, just it. Not that I guess the character goes through like feels different between Civil War and Infinity War as it is. It's not like you needed this to plug the gap to be like, oh, okay, so that's why she turns this way in Infinity War, and that's why she feels different than Civil War. I don't know. The character still feels the same, I guess, either way, but it does come out of this movie feeling a little bit more hopeful by the time you get to Infinity War, maybe seeing that character again. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what the complaints are about online. I'm just trying to present the question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of a complaint, like, they could have given this character her own spotlight sooner.
Yeah,
like,
I could get that.
Like, if you're gonna have like this whole basis of these big six, if you will, and having her and Hawkeye be the only ones that don't get their own films, they could have at least had a duo movie or this or something sooner than this.
Yeah.
Since they were part of that main group.
So speaking of Hawkeye, Mike, one thing that I listened when I went back and listened to the episode where we talked about the trailer, one of the points you made was that just from that first trailer, you said something along the lines of you were happy that Budapest isn't part of this movie. So that was funny to me.
It is, but it isn't though too, because it doesn't go into what they did as much. You know what I mean? Like, she goes back to Budapest, she sees where they were, but it doesn't really get into what they did, does it?
I mean, I guess peripherally, yeah. I guess you get a little bit of the mission, but you don't see the mission.
And
Well,
fair,
Budapest wasn't where she it wasn't where she killed the daughter, is it?
That was my that was the way I interpreted what was going on. Is that yes, that happened somewhere around there, and they went in hiding for 10 days or whatever in Budapest.
Right. That's what I mean. They just went in hiding there. That's not.
But it
where
seemed like
happened.
they were on the run and being hunted, and they had to. Well, I guess she does say
Okay.
they have to lay low. But I mean, the Budapest safe house has arrow marks in the wall, so her and Hawkeye had some shit going. Like, they either fought there or defended themselves there.
Okay.
Yes, that was a question that I'm glad that they really didn't even answer, honestly. Because, again, that's one of those moments that they even call back to in Endgame that they remembered from Avengers, that fans especially latched on to that Budapest line that's never mentioned, from what I remember. It's never mentioned again between the first Avengers and Endgame. Neither of them bring it up. It's not talked about. But it had persisted in the fandom enough that they knew using that callback was going to be popular. I'm glad that we don't know what it was. We don't know, were they just in a battle together? Was there some kind of spy mission? Is that where he was tracking her down and decided not to kill her, and that's why there's arrow holes in the wall? I dig that. I like the mystery. I like kind of leaving it ambiguous. And I'm glad you brought up Mike's comment about that, because I didn't know if I had said this during that discussion about the trailer or not, or if it was just in person in real life.
You were not on that episode.
Oh, okay. Then it was not.
Yeah, it was me, Mike, and Andy.
Perfect. Then I might have just said it in real life at some point. When they were making the Black Widow movie and they finally announced it and whatnot, I remember saying to somebody, I hope this is not treated like Solo was. Which was, here's all the lore and every reference of the past that we've ever talked about with this character, and guess what? We're going to cram all those moments in to this one story that happens over an hour and a half to 2 hours, and they all can, like, everything about the mythos conveniently happens in this one adventure.
Right.
I didn't want this to be that. So I didn't want to get Budapest, the infamous Budapest event, as any kind of flashback, any kind of central moment to the story or framework. I'm glad it was not that.
Yeah. I'm glad that they poked fun at the pronunciation of Budapest too. Like, because that's Not that I think I realized it at the time, but I feel like when they made the jab at it, it's like, oh, you know what? You guys do pronounce it differently at a couple different points. So that was a fun little callback for me too. So next up, we'll just talk about direction quickly. Director for the movie was Kate Shortland. There's a couple things listed on her IMDb, most of which I don't know. Somersault, Lore, Berlin Syndrome. I don't know what any of those movies are, so I can't really attest to like what else she's done. But what do you guys think of the direction for this movie?
Very successful.
I don't remember any specific moments where I thought, damn, that's really good directing, or damn, that's really bad directing. So I didn't really experience any of those moments where I thought it went one way or the other.
Yeah.
I'd say a solid job, like got the job done.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that really stuck out to me that's like, okay, this is what I picture. But I mean, considering it's a big budget action movie, I think the action sequences were really well done, and I actually enjoyed a lot of how they were positioned and set design and sequences and stuff like that. I think they all flowed well enough together. I didn't lose track of what was going on and why. Like I can get behind that stuff. So I'd say good job. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, if it was her idea to have an avalanche prison break, I don't know whose idea that was, if that falls into direction or what, but we'll give her credit for it and say, well done on the avalanche prison break. That's amazing.
So on that comment, did we already just move on from story, or can we still chime in for that?
If you want to go back to it, we'll try to go quickly. I know we want to try to wrap up somewhere.
So the only 2 points that I would really call out as that might overlap with direction. I don't know if this falls into editing as well, but the biggest problem, and really the only huge problem I had with this movie, was the fact that Dreykov's floating atmosphere layer had been up there for 10 years, 15 years. Like I that was stupid in my opinion and completely unbelievable for everything else that had been presented to us for 10 years.
Yeah.
Like even where this falls in the sequence of chronologic events, it didn't need to be that. You didn't need to have something else crashing to Earth. There's no believable reason to say that it was like, they didn't even try saying like, oh, it has some kind of, masking technology.
Yeah.
That was completely unnecessary. I do wish from a story perspective that they would have utilized the widows more. The opening adult sequence with Yelena and everybody else, I think like even in the third act, I thought, other than like that one big like fight room sequence with Natasha and the rest of the group, I thought that like if you're pulling this group in and you're bringing back the lore of this guy's group and whatnot, I thought that the rest of the widows under his program would have continued to be more of a presence.
Okay.
And play in.
I mean, technically, they're still on the board too, so I wouldn't be surprised if they show up or they do something with at least some of them
later
in a
perhaps.
future movie or something.
Yeah, I just thought like they're all around. Why are they not being a part of the action or tactics or things more? But
right,
that was about it. Everything else I thought was really good. The fight sequence, the fight with Natasha and Yelena when they first meet, I actually wish it had gone longer.
Yeah,
it was really well done and looked like either like them or their stunt performers were like really going at it. Like it was very John Wickian. It was the Atomic Blonde, and it was just visceral, brutal.
Yeah, there's a lot of action sequences I think stick with me. Like I think the car chase is awesome. I think the initial fight between Natasha and Taskmaster on the bridge is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like seeing the Taskmaster. I keep saying Taskmaster. It's Taskmaster. Utilize other. You can see the other Avengers fighting style when they're fighting on the bridge. You start seeing like Captain America, and there's a quick swinging bit that's like, okay, that must be like a Spider-Man move. That's just fun to see all that kind of shit. And the whole third act action sequences I think is pretty cool. Even you see it in the trailer, but like all this debris falling from the sky, that could have been really stupid. And I don't feel like it came across that way to me in the third act, that all that stuff was just way over the top and stupid. I was like, all right, let's go. I'm in it. Let's fucking go. Yeah, I don't know if I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I really did like all the action sequences a lot.
I felt like I liked most of them, but the one that I wanted to be better that felt like it fell short was Red Guardian and Taskmaster.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I could see that.
All the rest I thought were really good, but that one felt very choppy to me.
Yeah, he just kind of gets his ass kicked the whole time and doesn't really do anything.
Well, that, and it's like the editing, you know what I mean? Like it's
okay, yeah.
The camera, the editing, the choreography just seemed a little bit off on that one to me.
Yeah.
I also liked that in the one sequence they eliminate him from the fight. When they're all in the safe house and it's going to be stormed, and he gets shot up with like all the tranquilizers.
Yeah.
I like that they eliminate him from what's about to happen, because he kind of throws a trump card on it, being the only superpowered individual in the fight, where it's like, well, he can solve this. Oh,
yeah.
Never mind, he's out. I like that, and it put it took the focus away from him, and it put it on them to solve it.
Yeah,
which I like that. I like how they handled that.
So before we get to a rating, last thing we want to touch on that we haven't yet is the post-credits scene. So sort of just like general, what did you think of this? And then two, one point I want to make is that I'm trying to figure out what's going on here with Valentina and her recruiting. Like, as we know from Falcon and Winter Soldier, she has John Walker's U.S. agent and now Yelena. Now, we've spitballed with Falcon and Winter Soldier that maybe it's like a Dark Avengers team or Thunderbolts or some sort of like anti-Avengers kind of team. And that kind of tracks given Valentina's questionable loyalties that we sort of talked about back then too. And that she is, specifically in this scene, seems to be sending Yelena after Hawkeye. But at the same time, I think Falcon and Winter Soldier tries to put John Walker on a redemptive path by the end. And I feel like in this movie, we're supposed to be rooting for Yelena also. So would they really put these people as part of an anti-Avengers squad if we're supposed to be rooting for them?
I could see what you're getting at. I think what stands out to me in this instance for how they're going to play this, at least at the start, Hawkeye didn't look normal in that picture to me. The picture of Hawkeye that she shows him, he looked off.
He looked like Ronin. Like, he looked like he was in his Ronin attire. Like, straight up assassin type of Hawkeye. Like, Endgame, I'm killing people with a sword.
Yeah, but Hawkeye. I'm saying his eyes looked weird. Like, they looked, I don't know, it looked different to me. And I have just one working theory in my brain on it, and maybe she's having her hunt down a Skrull version of Hawkeye.
Is this going to be the Mephisto of, like, the MCU now? Every time someone's like, oh, it's going to be a Skrull.
It's Secret Mephisto. Invasion. It's happening. This is the start. I could see that being possible. I think the Thunderbolts is very likely. As it same goes for Dark Avengers. I think that's what it's leading towards.
I mean, she's definitely starting to recruit people like Fury used to do at the beginning of Phase 1 and stuff like that. Like, she's just popping up with a character and saying, you're going to join my team.
And right. I think they're gonna try to position her as a foil to him, as another string puller, because she's obviously using fuzzy logic and specious information that she's sharing to Yelena, like, oh, this is the person responsible for the death. It's a little more complicated than just that.
Right.
There's a backstory you need to be aware of before
I also think
you
it's
just
funny.
Assume.
I also think it's funny that, like, any type of person that may or may not get the mantle of Black Widow, their rite of passage to possibly get in the Avengers is to go through Hawkeye. Like, Natasha would have had to do it, and now Yelena's got to go through Hawkeye to, come out the other side as possibly, like, a good guy for our team. So I just think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, maybe that's exactly why they're positioning her that way.
I mean, we know there's a Hawkeye show coming.
Right.
So you start to think, is she going to be the antagonist in the Hawkeye show? Is he going to be being hunted by her in the show?
I don't know if we want to do spoilers or not, but she is absolutely credited.
Okay. Well, that
In that
that makes
show.
sense given the
Yeah.
context of what the end credit scene is.
Yeah, like what her capacity will be. Obviously, we'll have to wait till it gets released. Hopefully, I guess later this year. But yeah, like she's apparently like very very present in it.
Yeah. Josh, do you see them building like an anti-Avengers team, or do you think this is just going to be another team for something else? Do you think they're actually going to put them toe-to-toe against Avengers or
That's
something else?
interesting. I almost hope that they don't, because I like the idea of somebody manipulating individuals for some specific reason.
Mm,
You know, so she has John Walker, and she's trying to use he's a tool.
yes.
I'm going to use you as a means to an end for this thing I want to achieve. Same thing with Yelena. I don't know if the idea is like to take down S.H.I.E.L.D., to take down the Avengers, to do a thing. I think it's more, here, I'm putting tools in my tool belt, and you are things I can call upon and use in my scheme because I want to achieve thing X this
Right.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see. Again, I can't. I'm just spitballing because I don't know which way it's gonna go. Like I don't still, like Mike said, I don't know really what team they're doing yet, because I think there's a couple different versions where they could go or what they could refer to them as.
Mhm.
And if Valentina ends up being on the side of like a shady bad guy, I want to know kind of like what this team is being built to do. If it's not to go against the Avengers, like they're being built for a reason. So what are the skill set that's needed and what's going to go on here? I don't see this being like the big bad of whatever the hell's coming in the next couple phases. I think
Mm-mm.
other things that are happening in the MCU are pointing to bigger shit that's going on. So this is definitely more local type of stuff.
I think she is going to be part of a big bad at some point. I don't think it's this phase. I think they're kind of revealing a little bit in other things about the big bad that is there to worry about. I'm not going
Right.
to get into spoilers
Right.
for other things at this time, but they're getting into that elsewhere. But I think she's going to be around for multiple phases, just like Fury was.
Yeah.
And I think, it's going to be a long time before we see what she's really doing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
like 5 to 10 years before you have any clue what the hell she's really up to.
Well, think of this too, and so we're recording this on the day that the final episode of Loki is released on Disney Plus, which got me to realize there's going to be a lot more to juggle now. I'll make a broader point when we probably end up doing a Loki series discussion, but you might not need her to be a cinematic presence. You're going to need multiple things probably to be through lines and connective tissue among these shows as well.
Yeah.
So that could be the niche that somebody like her character has. She's now, so think about it, this movie should have been released first. This should have been the very first thing seen about Phase 4. So that
Yeah.
scene was already written and shot probably before Falcon and Winter Soldier. So this should have been the first time we ever saw her. And then she pops up, should have been the second time she pops up at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier. And so you don't necessarily, it could go that way, but not everything, needs to maybe go to the scale of cinematic chapter threat.
Yeah.
She could be the puppet master working through several of these Disney Plus shows.
Well, how did you guys interpret their conversation? Is Yelena already recruited, or is she there to recruit Yelena? I read it as she is already part of this team, whatever she has going on.
I did too.
Yeah, I guess it could go either way.
Because
I
one,
wanna tell myself-
she either recognizes who Valentina is just from being part of the spy world or whatever, or she's already working for her and she's like, just leave me the fuck alone. She tells her like, I'm on holiday. I'm not working now. Why are you here?
Yeah, that's probably a better argument. I think I wanted to take it as they've, for whatever reason, they're already familiar with each other, but perhaps she's been pestering her to cooperate, work
Right,
together,
right.
etc., trying to recruit her, whatever you want to call it. And Yelena has resisted it from time
Right.
to time, but now, like, oh, now I found something that's really going to strike a personal chord with you, and you're gonna listen.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could go either way. You guys are probably right, though.
And I think the one comment sort of Mike touched on earlier that I want to loop back around to and this is, maybe it's just personal preference, but we'll see what you guys think. So, again, chronologically, the majority of this movie takes place between Civil War and Infinity War. If you watch the end credits scene at that time, it spoils Nat's ultimate fate. So, theoretically, for someone new to the MCU, how do you have them watch this movie? Do you put that in timeline order where it's supposed to and just say, hey, ignore the end credits and come back to it 3 movies after? Or, like, because I imagine this is going to fuck people up. Like, people are not going to know not to watch the end credits, and by this point, they are trained to watch the end credits. So if they watch this chronologically, this end credit scene is going to fuck people up.
If they're trained, if they're trained to watch end credits on these movies, but they haven't seen all of them yet, and they happen to be doing so by watching them all in chronologic order of timeline, I think the Venn diagram on that is pretty slim.
I mean, Josh, you were the one to point out to us that on Disney Plus, they put this in timeline order right after Civil War and before Black Panther.
That is correct. On one of the options, that's how they organize it. So if a brand new, if a newbie is going to decide to do that, I mean, but it
and
also
I'm not
goes
talking
back-
about people like watching it today, right now, this opening weekend. I'm thinking like next year. Someone wants to
Sure.
catch up on these movies they haven't seen before. And they're
Right.
just on Disney Plus going through the list. Like, you're right. I think it is going to be a minority of people. But I still think it's going to happen. And I don't know why, but I feel for those people. Like, how do you warn these
Yeah.
people not to do this?
Yeah, I know. I'd have to really like write something down and think about it, because I feel like other chapters have done this as well. They've created conflicts,
Oh, yeah. I
particularly
definitely
with,
think...
with their credit stingers.
And there's a specific order that I tell people when they ask me to watch movies in, specifically to align the end credit scene with the next movie, so you're not skipping around with some of the connective tissue there.
So you don't like the chronological order then?
No, I don't. Because
So-
I think
so
like
you don't
there's
go
certain
Captain
movies in,
America
Well, you
then
could-
Captain Marvel. You don't.
You couldn't do Captain Marvel that way, yeah, because the end credits on Captain Marvel, you're like, what the hell? Like, if those are the first two and only you watched, you're like, what? Who number one? Who are most of these people in the stinger of Captain Marvel, and what are they talking about?
Exactly. And that's when that huge stinger comes back like 20 movies later and they're like, bam, here it is. I'm kidding, of course. That's like, that would be amazing. Like, had they actually done that in the first place, that would have been amazing. But
yeah, it's like, I don't know, the way they release these, it works for people that are up to date on this stuff. It's the people that I find coming to this stuff later that you really got to dance around what they can and can't see based in some of these movies, and that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the most enjoyable way to watch it, honestly, is just release order.
I mean,
think-
at this
I
point,
think-
it's getting less
yeah.
complicated that way, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely could choose to do a couple different ways if you really wanted to, but you don't need to.
no.
Fair
I
enough.
don't see any reason to
There-
watch
there's-
these in anything but just release order.
Yeah, there's nothing diminishing about doing it that way.
Okay, fair. All right, so we'll end with rating out of 10. What do you think you would give Black Widow?
I'm going with a 7.5.
Can you elaborate a little bit or no?
This is just through my MCU lens, and I think it's very solid. I like the opportunity that Scarlet was finally given after being the face of the female representation
Yeah.
for 10 years, and how her story concluded, and getting this opportunity. There were a couple things that we've talked about that I think were like, why the hell did you do that? But whatever. every scene of her character, the character of Natasha, every scene that was a character scene was won by both her and everybody.
Yeah.
But when I think of the other things in the MCU that I would rate an 8, a 9, a 10, this isn't, for me, this is not going to be Guardians of the Galaxy or Avengers or Infinity War.
Right.
Or Winter Soldier. So I can't get above that, but there's also several that I would give far less than a 7.5.
Fair enough. Mike?
I come down around 8. And I think it's a very solid movie. But I don't feel like it's great.
Okay.
I don't feel like it has that kind of what Josh said, that hook of Guardians of the Galaxy, or the entertainment of Ragnarok, or like it doesn't hit the Winter Soldier levels. Like it's, but at the same time, I feel like it's in that next tier down from there. Like it's in that middling group of MCU movies where they're good, but they're not going to knock your socks off. It's not going to change how you view a superhero movie, or it's not going to change much of anything. I think, maybe had this come out before Winter Soldier and it was like the first kind of spy type action movie thing, it might have been a little different, but
yeah.
An 8 is a solid score. I think that's what it deserves, but again, it's very good, and I can't say a whole lot wrong with it, but there's also nothing that blew me away that makes me want to watch it over and over and over again.
Yeah. I fall pretty much in line with these guys. I after one viewing, and I usually try to fit in 2 before I really start to nail down a review or a rating or something like that. But after one viewing, I think I'm leaning towards an 8 as well. I think it is really, really solid. I think they do a really good job with the character, and again, just as like an action movie. I think it's a really great action movie. I actually do want to see it again. I just don't know when I'm going to get around to actually seeing it again. And I don't know if it might be in the theater longer than most, so I might end up getting back around to the theater, but I don't know if I will have to wait until, 3 months from now when it's finally on Disney Plus for anyone to watch before I watch it again. But I will definitely watch it again when that happens. But yeah, I think they did a lot of stuff right. One thing I didn't mention, pacing for me, I think in the first act was a little bit slow. I think the movie took a little bit to get going for me, but by the second act, I think I'm on board for the whole rest of the movie, and it was really good. So that's where I'm falling. I'm gonna fall with an 8. Yeah. So that's it for Black Widow. I was trying to think like what we might do next. I'm not really quite sure. Like Josh mentioned, Loki finale is today, so I think we all watched it. We're all kind of itching to talk about it. But if we do that again next week, that's like the 3rd episode in a row that you have with just the 3 of us because no one else watches the show. So we'll see if we decide, if we want to change it up a little bit and get some other guys in here, or just leave it with this crew. We'll see how we go next week. So you may or may not have this to look forward to next week, but we will eventually, yes, talk about Loki for sure, because we have to now. It's done, and there's stuff worth talking about in there. But that's it for us. If you've enjoyed the show, please support us. Leave a 5-star rating and review. Be sure to give us a share on social media. You can follow or subscribe to the show. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Google, Anchor, Stitcher. Hopefully, anywhere you're listening, you can find us there. Check us out on Facebook. Search Bry Guy and the Super Friends. Go to facebook.com/Bry Guy Super Friends. You can send us questions, comments, topic suggestions, any of that stuff there. Try to email us, bryguysuperfriends@gmail.com. I haven't checked it. Probably won't, but you can try me. Hit us up on Twitter @BGSuperFriends. Feel free to give me a follow on Twitch @JediBryGuy. That's Jedi with an I, Bry with a Y. Anytime we decide to go live, which we've done it twice, I keep talking about it. We'll find a reason to do it sometime. We will broadcast live there. I'll make sure I promote that so everybody knows it's coming. Other than that, on behalf of Josh, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.